Hi, my name is Alexis Bach, and I am here with Laurie Huske, the president of NAMI King County North, and today we're going to talk about PTSD.
Thank you. Before we even get started, Alexis, I would like to remind our listeners that we are not doctors, we are not therapists, we are simply family members who have embarked on this journey through mental health conditions. And so anything that I offer you as far as informational is what I have learned from NAMI National and some of the other more prominent mental health resources. We're going to talk today about post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and it's a term that we hear a lot now. And I think initially people leap to the idea that it's always military related because that's where we hear most of the...
I was just going to say that. I think PTSD, and I think of these soldiers who have served our country so bravely come back and then they struggle with this condition.
But now we know more about trauma, and we know it can affect anyone. Traumatic events such as an accident, an assault, military combat, or natural disaster can have lasting effects on a person's mental health. While many people will have short responses to life-threatening events, some will develop longer-term symptoms that can lead to a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD symptoms often coexist with other conditions such as substance abuse disorders, depression, and anxiety. A comprehensive medical evaluation resulting in an individualized treatment plan is optimal. And we stress that always. Before you go right down the path of assuming that there is a mental health condition, see your regular physician first, because there are other physical problems or illnesses that can cause behaviors that we assume are mental health behaviors. People that have thyroid conditions.
Oh, okay.
Your thyroid can, not work correctly, and it can cause some behaviors and things that, we on our own misdiagnose. And so start with your physician first and make sure everything else is healthy before you go on to the next thing.
How long does PTSD last? Is it something that can be treated and can be completely cured from?
No.
Or no?
My understanding is that you are never cured, because now we know that trauma changes your brain. It changes the construction of your brain. So people who suffer from PTSD, and I'll go over some of the symptoms in a minute, but the therapies teach them how to self-regulate those behaviors, how to calm themselves, how to remove themselves from a situation. Let me give you an example. I worked with a fellow one time who worked in a printing company, and he said every once in a while the big presses make this very loud boom. He's a Vietnam veteran, and he said, my coworkers have come to recognize when I hit the floor, it's a reaction to that boom, and they don't need to worry about me. I'll get up and go on, but his body still reacts to that loud noise. Even my own father, I've talked with my siblings, and we recognize he most likely had PTSD after World War II. He was at age 21, a young fella that his unit went in, and when the war ended, and brought out the survivors from the concentration camps. And that impacted him forever. And we used to kind of joke about some of his quirky things when he was younger, but now we understand that was his reaction to that trauma he saw.
I know that Ecker Center recently sponsored a wonderful training about trauma, and they mentioned that trauma can also be remembered in your body. So it's not just a mental, it's like your body automatically responds to it.
And the presenter also said, we can hand that trauma down through the generations. So, if we have a hurricane, like these massive hurricanes that we've had, that's trauma. People have lost everything. And it's going to take a long time to recover, if ever, from that. I've heard people that have had that diagnosis after the loss of a job that they thought they would have forever, that meant the world to them, and did not see it coming, that it was going to end. And that's a trauma. So we don't judge how difficult the trauma is, because it's different for everyone because of our own makeup. That's
something that I really took away from the NAMI family to family education course, which I would recommend anyone who has a relative or a loved one or a spouse, they take this course, is that trauma is so incredibly individualized, which kind of leads me to wonder, as a parent or a loved one of someone who deals with severe mental illness, can PTSD be a part of that also for ourselves?
Oh, I would say for sure.
So would a typical thing be, I see the phone ring, or I see who's on the phone, and it's one of my family members who have mental illness, and automatically my heart just starts pounding, and I start thinking, prepare yourself.
Right. I have that same response. And, there were times I didn't even want to pick up the phone. I was so frightened. Another response was, I never knew what I was coming home to. So I could have a normal work day, but as soon as I pulled into the driveway, my heart started pounding. I recognize now it was sort of an anxiety that was building, because I absolutely did not know what I was going to walk into at any given time.
So what are some effective treatments for those of us who do suffer from PTSD, whether it's on a smaller scale or a larger scale?
Well, there are many, many treatments. And I want to say, first of all, that what we've sort of been talking about, the causes, you have to get a good diagnosis. And your symptoms may last a long time. Some may go away. Some may last forever. And so you need to be working with someone who really understands, and you're keeping good charts on those symptoms. And again, I always tell family members, keep a journal for your loved one. Note what you see happening, what you think may have triggered something. And it may not make sense at the moment, but down the road it may. Always date those things when you see them. Anything that is significant to you that you see happening, write it down. It's not going to hurt anything. Some of the treatment that they use is psychotherapy. And someone I love has PTSD and found that DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, and they are now finding that that's really the go-to therapy for PTSD. It's a one-on-one therapy, and this person says, it saved my life. It was awful going through it, because you're working with your therapist and confronting the trauma and walking through the trauma.
I've heard a lot of good things about DBT, and actually used some of the techniques myself.
Right.
And I know that it's fairly new, I guess you could say.
It is, and I always caution, if someone says they're trained in DBT, make sure you see that certificate hanging in their office, because, sometimes people think, well, I can do that, but it is a specialized therapy. So the other one is cognitive behavioral therapy. Again, these are talk therapies. And we know, as family members who've survived some tough stuff, talking about it takes a huge burden off your shoulders. And so with the right therapist, this works very well. Medications often help, because oftentimes PTSD presents itself along with anxiety and depression. And so sometimes those medications really help a person get more stabilized to be able to work through the therapy. And self-management techniques. And we teach this to everyone, including the family members. Learning to recognize that that's a trigger.
Okay.
Learn to remove yourself from a situation if you need to. Go walk around the block. Learn how to be mindful, present in the moment, so your thoughts are not running out of control, and get yourself grounded again. And those are huge.
Where can I learn more about PTSD?
You can go to, of course, NAMI.org, and there's lots of information there. They also list many other related resources and conditions that you can look into, just so you feel you're armed with some information. I also want to point out that service animals, we are now recognizing how important pets are to recovery, especially for military people who have really seen some things that they cannot unsee. So having a pet you love, and especially a trained service animal where you can get yourself out, in the community again, if you have your pet with you, is a huge thing.
Well, thank you very much, Laurie. It was a pleasure to have you on our podcast today, and we'll see you for the next one.
I'll be there.